Ladies and gentlemen, we are at the Warsaw Royal Castle, an estate that served as a residence for king and monarchs of Poland for centuries. Follow me and my guests as we unravel the story and history of this amazing place on Poland Daily History. The First Polish-Swedish War started in 1598 over the control of the Swedish crown. It was the first phase of a series of wars which would last up until the early 18th century. Our first guest is Łukasz Jędrzejczak, a historian and longtime guide at the Warsaw Royal Castle. Dynasties don't last forever, and at one point we know that a new one moved in and have significant influence on Warsaw and the Royal Castle alike. And who were they, and what is it like?
When the last Jagiellonian, the son of Queen Bona, Sigismund II Augustus, was dying, he was childless, so the nobility decided to select a king out of a number of candidates. The first two rulers were chosen a little by coincidence, but also partly against the wishes of the Habsburg dynasty. The first was Henry Valois, a French prince, the second was the Prince of Transylvania, Stefan Batory, while the third was Sigismund Augustus' nephew and the grandson of Sigismund the Old, Sigismund III, the King of Sweden. The nobility didn't see him as a king from the House of Vasa. This mentality did not exist in the Polish nobility. He was considered a Jagiellonian from his mother's side. When he announced his candidacy for the throne, the majority of the nobility supported him to be chosen as the next king of Poland. His sons, Władysław IV Vasa and Jan Kazimierz, ruled after him, and to be honest, both of them were sure candidates for the crown. The nobility only had to choose between Sigismund III's sons. In this way, we can talk about the Vasa dynasty from a historical perspective as something of Swedish dynasty, which unfortunately fomented a number of conflicts between Poland and Sweden, especially after Sigismund was dethroned as the King of Sweden in 1599. This started a long series of wars between the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and Sweden.
Wojen polsko-szwedzkich.
So to follow that up, with the influence of the Swedish dynasty, does it make a change to the shift of Polish foreign policy to pointing towards the north?
Za czasów panowania Zygmunta Augusta
Under the rule of Sigismund Augustus, a war erupted over the so-called Dominium Maris Baltici. It was a war over who would rule the Baltic Sea region. Denmark stood on one side with Poland and Lithuania, and on the other, Sweden had a pact with Russia. But when Eric XIV lost his Swedish crown to John III, who was Catherine Jagellon's husband, loyalties changed. Sweden became an ally of Poland against Denmark and Russia. This pact came to an end when Sigismund III lost his crown in Sweden in 1599 to his uncle Charles IX. And after this, a year later, in the year 1600, a decades-long era of wars between Sweden and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, as the Polish Vasa dynasty was attempting to return to power in Sweden.
Odzyskanie korony przez polskich Wazów.
So lastly, how does this specific castle look like during the time of the Swedish dynasty?
During Sigismund III's rule, the castle was thoroughly reconstructed. Curia Major and Curia Minor, the two buildings on this site which had been erected in medieval times and rebuilt during the reign of Queen Bona Sforza, were now connected into one building, and 3 additional wings were constructed. It was in this way that the castle assumed the shape it has currently. The reconstruction of the castle took nearly 15 years. It was rebuilt in the Baroque style that was rapidly gaining popularity in those times. The Vasa monarchy gathered together a great collection of art, a few hundred paintings, tapestries, sculptures and beautiful stucco art. It can without a doubt be said that the castle owed its great development to the Vasa patron.
The turn of the 16th and 17th century is considered the apex of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. It is also a time in which the Polish parliamentary system matures, modeling itself on ancient Greece and Rome according to new Renaissance ideas. Next up, we will speak with Marcin Skalski-Truskolaski, a historian and expert on heraldry, genealogy, and everything relating to the Polish nobility. To illustrate the spirit of the time, he is dressed as a Polish nobleman of the era. First Polish parliament convened in 1468, and I was wondering how did that came about?
Pierwszy rzeczywiście to jest dość nowe odkrycie, że pierwszy Sejm.
Yes, this is a new discovery. The first parliament, an extraordinary government, gathered together in 1468, 2 years after the peace treaty in Thorn in 1466, which was a very important event. It was actually a groundbreaking event in Polish relations with the Krzyżacy, the Knights of the Teutonic Order. After the great Polish victory against the Teutonic Order in the Battle of Grunwald in 1410, it turned out that the population living in Prussia are in favor of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. They were tempted by the privileges and the freedom that the Polish king gave to the cities, the knights and the nobility. Soon there was another armed conflict, and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth won the 13-year war between 1454 and 1466. It was a long war, but ended in victory, after which the Grand Master of the Knights of the Teutonic Order became a vassal of the Polish king, and the first extraordinary parliament commenced, comprised of 3 different factions.
Na którym mamy do czynienia z trzema czynnikami. Król jako odrębny stan,
the king as the executive power, the council that becomes the Senate, and the nobility forming the lower house, so the parliament. That was the beginning. It was decided that the parliament would come together every 2 years. Of course, it's now difficult to say how it worked in practice in those times, but it is important that up to the adoption of the so-called nihil novi constitution in 1505, when it was determined that nothing new could be enacted without the agreement of the council and the MPs of the lower house.
Ustala się, że nic nowego nie zostanie uchwalone bez zgody Rady I posłów ziemskich.
These MPs were representatives of specific regions known as lands. As I mentioned earlier, the lower house was made up of the so-called lands, which were the part of an indigenous territorial organization predating the United Polish Kingdom. Poland was made up of these lands, so was Lithuania, and MPs from all these lands were represented in the parliament.
Mógł sam decydować ani o wojnie, ani o nakładaniu podatków. To oczywiście wynikało z całego szeregu poprzednio wydawanych przywilejów.
It was important that the king was unable to decide about going to war or about taxes, privileges that the king has previously had. But now the executive power, that was the king, had to get agreement from the parliament. Without this agreement, the king would not be able to make any decisions at all.
Na takich sejmach uchwalano tak zwane konstytucje. To nie były konstytucje
In these parliamentary sessions, so-called constitutions were enacted. They were not constitutions in today's understanding, in other words, basic law, but explicit laws. The Polish law was over time collected into a document called Volumina Legum, which was subsequently published. It happened in the early 18th century. All these constitutions were collected and then formed laws in the Polish Republic.
Praw, które obowiązywały w Rzeczypospolitej.
To follow up on that, how does the beginning of Polish parliamentarism compare to the rest of the Europe?
Tak, to rzeczywiście była różnica, która się pogłębiała, ponieważ
It was certainly different and got more and more different with time. Both Eastern and Western Europe were going in the direction of limiting the rights of parliaments and governments at both city and national levels in favor of giving all the power to the monarch, who was in charge of the state's wealth, and all of his servants, who were subject to the absolute will of the king. In the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the so-called Rzeczpospolita, or the most serene republic, the situation was completely different. Every nobleman was guaranteed personal immunity and wealth immunity.
Zupełnie inaczej. Rycerz najpierw, potem szlachcic, miał zagwarantowaną nietykalność osobistą.
Without a court order, it wasn't possible for anyone, including the king, to arrest a nobleman or to throw him in prison. He was a free person in every sense of the word. The notion of freedom was very strong in the century when Polish parliamentarism really developed, that is, the 16th century. It was a time when the Renaissance was dominating the scene in Poland, and the Polish nobility were inspired by the ancient Greek democratic tradition and the republicanism in Rome. These were the examples which the Polish system modeled itself on. The freedom of the nobility was said to be what differentiated the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth from other states. This freedom was without a doubt the most precious jewel of Polish parliamentarism.
Rzeczpospolitą od innych państw. Ta wolność była właśnie tym najcenniejszym klejnotem polskiego parlamentaryzmu.
Here at the Warsaw Royal Palace, we learned the history and story of Polish democracy and how the parliamentary system came to be. It later on became an influence to Europe and to the whole world. It is not just a story of the castle, but also the story of Warsaw and the story of Poland. That's it for today. See you next time on Poland Daily History.